Oh god, when I agreed to do this, I didn't know how many factions there were. Alright, let's get through it. Kislev! Kislev is a rebranding of the Empire. I don't mean that to dismiss them, I just mean that to say a lot of the same things I said about the Empire. This is one of the best starter campaigns, not because it is easy, but because it does get you a lot of experience with different game mechanics. To the north, you are surrounded on all sides by demons and hostile enemies that are Skaven running around. You'll have plenty of factions to fight, so you don't get lost in the sea of, oh boy, I get to fight the Lizardmen again. You'll get to experience a lot of factions at once. It's pretty cool. They have 2 Lords of Magic, making it easy to figure them out and learn all the spells in quick succession, whereas sometimes if you're playing the High Elves or Empire, you're like, oh crap, there's 8 Lords of Magic or 9 or 10. So much to learn. Here, learn Tempest, learn Ice, you know them all. Good for you. They have a good diverse roster. Heavy Cav, Archers, Elite Infantry, so you can play whatever style you want. It is a good starter campaign. I enjoyed it. Like I said, it is an empire builder. You want to conquer some territories, raise them up, put a bunch of economic and public order buildings around. You know, you just want to be a good steward of your people. Their starts are largely the same. That's the one thing I will say is it's not crazy diversity. Same as you're talking about with Cathay. They're all kind of right up there in Kislev with Boris Ursus starting the Chaos Waves, but that's about it. So, take your pick. Might not have a ton of replay value since you're in the same part of the world, but it is a fun first shot. In battle, Kislev does have heavily armored units that could be good at holding points in domination mode if they can get there, but they suffer from the Cathay problem of being a bit slow on the draw and very expensive to summon, so it's not like you can just spam out a bunch of them and start walking. You really need to invest in a good, strong push. In both domination and land battles, their ranged units are pretty key to their victory. Kossars are excellent archer units with very high melee stats. Even Kossars or Spears actually have pretty good anti-large on them. 15 is nothing to joke about. Streltsy are decently heavily armored, so dogs will have a hard time fighting them, plus 28 melee stats are nothing to scoff at. Ice Guard, unfortunately, suffer from being too expensive and too general. They don't have incredible melee stats, and they don't have incredible missile stats, making their 1,100 price point a bit much for only 50 armor, and a good wind spell is going to take them out, so Ice Guard have really struggled to find their place in the meta. Probably stick to the Streltsy, Kossars, Spears, and Kossars. As for their infantry, it is limited but effective. Kossars are really good melee combatants, highly armored, shielded, and they have a pistol shot for if in the late game you just need to shoot some cav that is being a bit tricky. Kossar's great weapons are fine. They have slightly worse melee stats than their Kossar brethren, but they do get armor piercing. Zargard could hold forever and also punish low armor front lines. Zargard with great weapons are very expensive, so only take them if you need them, but armor piercing solid. Solid. The Kislev infantry are necessary, kind of like High Elves. I said that in a previous video. Their archers are great. Their front line is necessary, but not your favorite thing in the whole world. Their cav also, unfortunately, suffers. Griffin Legion and Winged Lancers both lack armor piercing and lack anti-large, and their stats are a little underwhelming for their price point. They're not the best. Their high-tier cav and their low-tier cav are both great, though. Kossovite Dervishes are excellent cav pieces for 450. You almost always end up taking 4 of them in any competitive build. They're just so good for 450 gold. The Warbear Riders are niche. You don't want to take them if your opponent has a lot of ranged pressure or a lot of infantry, but against large targets, they are exceptional. Large single entities disintegrate when touched by the Warbear Riders, and enemy cav also do not have a great time fighting the big polar boys. Also, you're usually supported by healing. So your high tier and low tier cav are great. Mid tier cav sucks. Your infantry are okay. Your missile infantry are great. Chariots, the heavy war sleds, have still been doing pretty well, though they can get trapped up and take a ton of damage, so you have to be careful with them. The light war sleds are generally considered to be overcosted, especially because they're not really skirmish cav. With their missile strength, they're mostly meant to be melee. Horse archers of Kislev are divisive. Their melee stats are fine. Their skirmish potential is okay. But they're not going to carry a whole game for you, and 600 gold is a lot. So you really need to know why you're bringing them, and they need to be critical. Don't just throw a couple in for fun, because they're not going to get their value out. The artillery, Little Grom, is excellent versus cavalry or monstrous infantry or monstrous artillery, such as Ushabti Great Bows. They're okay in a single entity fight or dueling other cannons. They're not so good against infantry. I mean, yeah, if they sit there and fire for 25 years, they'll be good against infantry, but there's better things to do with your time. So only take Little Grom if the enemy assets that you're worried about have a model count of about 50 or under. Monsters and Beasts. The Elemental Bear is weird. It's good in some cheese builds. Big blobs that can punish maybe Korn or Nurgle or Slanesh or something, but in most matchups or in any rush build, the Elemental Bear really just isn't worth it. He's very expensive. His melee stats are okay. His animations are pretty terrible. He's like a Dreadsaurian, but slow. I don't know. I think the Elemental Bear is pretty bad. He's weak to mass archer fire, and he needs healing support from a different hero. Snow Leopards are okay. They're niche. They're a really great sniping tool for horse characters, or I guess big single entities. Yeah, I guess, because they're only 650. That's the big thing to remember about them. Is the Snow Leopard isn't going to solo Scarbrand, but it'll probably take a big chunk out of his ass, and for 650 gold, that's fine. They demolish horse characters, though. So if your opponent usually takes mage on a horse, like potentially Tomb Kings with Arc in the Black, 2 Snow Leopards can serve you just fine. I skipped the Lords and the Heroes. I probably shouldn't have done that, but oh well, we're getting back to them. You're limited, because Dalton is generally not thought to be very good, so most people stick to the Tsarina or Boris Ursus. If you want to cast your Lord and go wide with your army, you go Tsarina. If you really want to support a blob, Boris is your boy. He's a good duelist, but he needs help. That help comes in the form of the Patriarch. Patriarchs are critical to a lot of Kislev blob matchups, where they just need... If you're going to take Boris, a Patriarch, and a bunch of bears, you're intending to kill some big armored targets, like Exalted Bloodthirsters of Korn or Kugoth Plaguefather or something like that. Patriarch has really nice support abilities with plus 40 melee attack AoE on a cooldown and 3 uses of a big heal aura. Plus, he has a constant heal aura as long as he's in melee combat, and he has melee attack and defense buffs for him, so he's pretty good in a blob. But if you go with Boris and a Patriarch, you also need a caster, and that is going to take about 4,000 to 5,000 of your 12,000 funds right away, so do be careful. Your lures are Ice and Tempest. It's a bit divisive in the community, which is good. I generally think both are subpar, but they're unfortunately all you have. I hope a future DLC will give Kislev more lures, because these are cool, but they're not actually super effective. And if your opponent knows that you're bringing one of these two, I mean, they can play around that. They also do the same thing. Like, neither have very good single entity killing potential. Both have some slows. Both have infantry punishing. So it's just like, yeah, okay. No matter what magic they're bringing, it's going to punish blobs, so I shouldn't blob. Yeah, that's Kislev. That's Kislev. If your opponent's going to have high armor stuff, get a bear blob and run them down. If your opponent's going to go wide, get a bunch of light cav, get a whole bunch of ranged units and shoot them to death, but Kislev's tricky. They're a difficult faction to play in multiplayer for sure. If you're playing against Kislev, you're going to need armor piercing. You're going to need a lot of armor piercing. Beastmen have particularly been doing well into Kislev with the Razor Gore herds, but most of their units have some amount of armor that you're going to need to punch through. Only their lowest of low tier don't have armor. Lord Sniping is also critical. You need a ranged Lord Sniping capability, because you never know when Boris and the Bear Blob is going to show up, and then you cannot enter melee with Boris and the Bear Blob. You need to shoot them. You need to shoot them. I have not seen anything that beats Boris and the Bear Blob in melee. Please, for the love of God, shoot them. Anyway, Skirmish Cav can be good versus Kislev for poking down the bears and the lords. Spirit Leech, Fireball, Soul Quench, any missile spell that can target a lord from a range is quite good. Final Transmutation is also quite excellent, because either Boris has to split off from the Patriarch and his healing source, and you can snipe him out then for a little bit before his peak healing source comes back, or they stay together and they just take a ton of damage. So single entity blob punishment tools are critical into Kislev, and armor piercing. Aside from that, you'll be fine. They kind of function like elves, where all their units are so expensive that you generally just want to overwhelm them with armor-piercing units that'll trade 1-for-1, and then you want to have more units with them, and eventually the 1-for-1 trades, you have a couple units standing and they don't. Kislev also has 0 flying presence as of right now. DLC could change that, but they have literally no flying units, which means you own the air. One thing you do have to be careful of is a lot of their units are hybrids. They have a ton of range, so don't just sit above their formation, because you are going to get shot. But you are uncontested in the skies, meaning you can take a flying lord that is fragile and leave them up there completely alone. Like a skink priest on a pterodon. Okay, nothing can hit him as long as he stays out of range of the range. But like, it's not like, oh crap, they have a manticore, I'm in trouble. Like, no, they don't. Anybody in the air is perfectly safe. Roar! Subscribe, yes, yes.